Welcome class back to Chapter 10, Files and Exceptions. This is the third and final video where we'll cover the last two objectives of storing data and refactoring. Storing data begins on page 202, and we're going to talk about the JSON module. And the JSON module allows you to store and read data. And it's important for us to note that JSON is very popular through multiple languages. And so we can dump data from one language and then go ahead and load it in a different language. So JSON.dump stores the data, and load will go ahead and load data. So here's our first example where we import the JSON module. We have a list stored in numbers. Our file name is numbers.json, and then we go ahead and open that file for writing, and then go ahead and use the dump module to go ahead and store our data in numbers.json. So we'll go ahead and run this. Before I do that, I'm going to actually make sure that I delete that file. So I'll show you what my files look like before. So I'm going to get rid of number.json and username JSON. So no JSON files in my list. I'll go ahead and build this file. So again, just like in our previous sections in Chapter 10, just a file is created. And you may have noticed a shift over here, and I can now see numbers JSON file. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this, and I'm going to use Sublime Text to do it. And then here is our numbers. It's just a repeat of our list because that's actually what we wrote to the file. So very straightforward, and that's another important thing about JSON, is it's very straightforward in its functionality. Now we're going to go ahead and look at how we can go ahead and read that data in Number Reader. So same thing here that we practiced in our first section of Chapter 10. We have our file name and numbers.json, and then we'll go ahead and use load, and then we have our file object that is the parameter of load. Whatever is in that file will be stored in numbers, and then here we're going to go ahead and output that. So what is on our numbers.json file is our list, and that is our output. So again, pretty straightforward, nothing too tricky about how to use JSON. Just make sure you import the JSON module first, and then either go ahead and use the dump method or the load method. Now we're going to go ahead and prompt users for information and then store that information. So this leads us to another example called Remember Me. So again, importing the JSON module, and then what is your name? Store that inside of username, and then ultimately that's what we're going to store inside of our username.json file. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in my other editor so that I don't have to go through the back door of executing it. So I'm going to go ahead and execute and get my name. We'll remember you when you come back, Amy. That is the print statement here. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up my username.json file, and I see the results is the string Amy. So you can directly write data to the file from your Python, or use input features to get that data first and then go ahead and write. Let's go ahead and look at greet user on page 204, where we're going to retrieve that user information. So again, using the username.json file, our load method. So very similar to the number reader. So welcome back, and we know that that string is Amy. Now we'll combine these two programs into one file, and that's on page 205. So we're going to bring in what we learned in the second video with the try block, except block, and the else block. And what we're going to do in the try block is we're going to retrieve the username from the file. In the except block, we would save the username, and in the else block, we're going to print out the welcome and then use the username. So this is the version of what's on page 205. So again, try has the with Okay, so trying to open the file to load the data from that file and store that in username. If the file is not created, so let's just say the first time we actually run Remember Me, and I just have 2 at the end for a different version. This is what's going to happen. So the first time we run this file, this is going to happen because the username.json file does not exist. And then it will prompt for the username, store that as we did before. And so let's go ahead and do that one. So I'm going to go ahead and delete username JSON so that that will execute. And Remember Me too. So what is your name? So going into that exception block because the file is not found. So remember you when you come back, Amy. That is right here. Now if the file exists, we're going to go ahead and do the try block and the else block. So let's go ahead and execute this one more time. So welcome back, Amy is now printed because the try was executed successfully and then the else block executed as well. Leads us into our last section, and that's called refactoring. And you've heard the term refactoring throughout the entire semester in multiple chapters and even in Alien Invasion. So what is refactoring? Refactoring makes your code cleaner, makes it easier to understand and easier to extend. And that last one is the most important there. Easier to extend. So easier to expand upon, easier to build upon, and add more code to. So we're going to look at the refactoring of Remember Me on page 206 and 207. So I'm going to take this file here and I'm going to split it into a function that's called greet user first, and then we're going to build upon that with more refactoring. So bottom of page 206, top of page 207 is where we begin. So we import JSON. We create a function called get stored username. And we want to get stored username if available. Okay, so we're going to use our file name. So file name, and then we have our try block. Okay, so in this case we're going to try to open the file. If we have the file does not exist, then we're going to return none. Okay, so I am going to just say return, actually indent, return none. So and then the else block is going to do the same thing. So the only purpose of this function is to get the stored username, nothing else. Okay, then we have another function called greet user. And in greet user, we're going to just greet. Oh, I indented too many times there. So we're going to call get stored username through this function. If a username exists, we will print, not sure what I'm doing there, hitting too many indents. Welcome back, username. Else, we are going to prompt them. So if we get a stored username, we have a username, so we'll go into the if, else we are going to create the username. So this is that input block, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and grab it here. So prompt them, use an open statement with open statement to actually store, as we did before in our previous examples. So the last thing that needs to be done is we need to call greet user. So remember that greet user, inside of greet user, we call get stored username, which is up here at the top. So let me go ahead and save, and then I'm going to come to over here, reload it over here. I am going to delete my username.json file, and then I'm going to execute this one. Hopefully I don't have any errors. So what is my name? So prompting for my username first will remember you when you come back. Okay, so that is this part right here. So we're getting the stored username. Well, that didn't happen because we don't have an existing file called username.json. Okay, so comes back, stores nothing in username because we have no file to retrieve a username from, so it goes right into the else block and executes our else block. So let's go ahead and one more time go ahead and refactor, because remember the purpose of a function is to do only one thing. Okay, so we're going to leave get stored username the same, but now we're going to split this greet user up in two separate functions. So let me jump back over here and we'll code over here. Get new username. So that's the else block here. And actually, instead of doing a print statement here, we're going to return the username. So return username back down to the call. And then in greet user, we're going to again see if we have a username. And in our else clause here, we will do username, where we'll call get username, get new username. And then we have our print statement. Okay, so again, the purpose of this refactoring is just to separate out the functionality into separate functions. So remember, the important thing about functions is that they only do one purpose. So when we started off, we had everything in one spot and it was actually doing three separate things. Then we went into where we had a get stored username doing its function, but then greet user was doing two types of functions, so then we separated them out. So we'll save this and then go ahead and run. Okay, and since we have that username file, or did I delete it? Okay, we'll remember you when you come back. Let's go ahead and see if it's created. So there's username.json. Oh, I'm just opening it up in brackets. I don't want that. We'll open it up in Genny. So there we go. So no matter how many times I run that, it's going to recreate it if the file does not exist. So let's go ahead and do that. And it should again, if we come out of that one, don't save, remember me. Let's execute. Let's put my name in there. Let's execute it again. Okay, so why does it keep asking me that? Let's see if I can go ahead and figure this out. Okay, so let's do a little bit of debugging here. So let's execute one more time, and we see that it prompts me. It creates that username.json file, but when I run it again, I get prompted again. So why is that? So some of the things that you can do to figure out the flow. So I know that first off it calls greet user. Well, then greet user comes in and gets get stored name. So I'm going to jump up here to get stored name, and then I'm going to see if something actually came out of this try. So I'm just going to put in simple a print found. So now I know that it got in here, and I'm going to execute. And so I see that it says found, but again, it's still prompting me. So why is it still prompting me if it's actually finding the username from the file? So then I trace it back. So now from there, it comes from the get stored username call back down here, stores it in username. So let's go ahead and put a print on username and run it. Now I see that it says found, but my username doesn't say Amy, my username says none. So then I start to look at, well, what actually returned up here. So when the file not found error says, it says returned none, that's correct. But in the else, it should say return username. So I mistyped that when I was working on page 206. So now if I execute, let's go ahead and delete the JSON file. And execute. I'm going to leave the prints in there for now. It says Amy. And then when I execute again, it says found, and it says found Amy, and it says welcome back Amy. So using your print statements is a great way for you to debug, and you can put those in at any point in your program that you need to. So let's go ahead and look at the lab that I want you to do for this particular section. So I don't have it highlighted in my book, so I'm just going to come over here and look to see which one it is. It is on page, it's 10-13, verify a user. So let's look at 10-13. It says, the final listing of Remember Me, okay, so the one that I'm currently looking at here, Remember Me factored, assumes either that the user has already entered their username or that the program is running for the first time. We should modify it in case the current user is not the person who last used the program. Before printing a welcome message, back message and greet user, ask the user if this is the correct information. If it's not, call get username to get the correct username. So let's see the functionality of this revision to Remember Me. So we're going to run the file, and we're going to put in another name. We'll remember you when you come back. Okay, let's go ahead and run it again. And it says, are you Sean? We'll say no. And then we'll put in Amy. We'll remember you when you come back. So that's the functionality of it. And so what you want to do is work on this section here with the if clause. So if username, welcome back, else, okay, username is what is your name, and so on. So in here you want to modify based on the conditions for 10-13. So remember, if you want to prompt them to say, hey, is that your name? If it isn't, say no, and then they can go ahead and enter in a new name. If you have any questions regarding any of the assignments for Chapter 10 or the alien invasion, please let me know. Thank you for your time.